The following program is made possible by the friends and partners of GodQuest Ministries.
From the CTN studio in Pensacola, Florida, this is Creation Today, where we believe the Bible is literally true and scientifically accurate, and we're not ashamed to say so. I'm one of your hosts, Eric Hovind.
And I'm Paul Taylor, and we're here each episode to answer your questions on the Bible and on science and cover what's going on in creation today. And for the second episode running, we're privileged to be joined by John Mackay, the International Director of Creation Research.
How are you folks?
Looking forward to learning more about the research you're doing down there and the things that we're discovering. It is absolutely amazing. You guys enjoy the show. We're excited about the show today because we've got special guest John Mackay all the way from Australia. Did you fly in?
Not directly. I sort of came via Canada and down, so I'm heading back south because I'm from the real south.
The real south, the real down under. We are excited to have him. If you want to get a hold of his ministry, he's done some incredible research, which is available at creationresearch.net. Yes. Also want to let you know that the new edition of the CSC Current is out, and we invite you to get a hold of that at creationtoday.org/current, where we do a lot of articles in there. Well, we're excited to have you. I want to get right into some of the research that you're doing, and Paul, I know you and John have known each other for a number of years. Is that right?
A very, very long time. Yeah, back a couple of centuries or so, yeah.
Well, what was interesting when we were talking yesterday, Paul, you said, actually, I first met you back in 1980. You named the church, and you remember the lady that was there at the church. And I went, how do you do that? God has blessed you with a really good memory.
He has, there's no doubt about it. I don't know how I do that, but it just happens, and I take advantage of it.
He remembers all these things. Well, remember for us, if you would, the question that you're most often asked. What is it that you get asked about a lot?
Well, the funniest version of the commonest questions, I was running a youth meeting, and my wife, who doesn't normally come to youth meetings, but she was sitting there, and a young man put his hand up, teenager, and said, "What's the oldest fossil you've ever dated?" Now, I will guarantee my wife can read my mind, because the look from her face was, if you dare say so I tried to answer it scientifically.
No, good. That was probably a wise thing to do.
At the moment, there's a real resurgence in questions about the age of things, and I love to remind people, look, even if we could prove the world was millions of years old, there's one question you haven't answered. Where did it come from?
That's true.
Right? Because how old something is doesn't change whether it proves creation or not. What it deals with is, are the 6 days literal?
Correct.
Right, and then we go on to a second question. So I love to remind them, look, if I was digging up King Tut's tomb and I found a nice round bench like this, now what would the evidence that was created be? Because everyone who walks into King Tut's tomb didn't believe any of those objects happened by themselves.
Correct.
Because a creation is something that shows evidence that somebody who existed before it, somebody who's not a part of it, and somebody is smarter than it, actually made wood, like this bench here, do things that wood wouldn't. Right? That's a creation.
It doesn't grow like this.
Yeah, and what you find is the smarter the creator was, the less time they took. That's how big companies make money. Put a smarter foreman on, you cut time out. And obviously if you start plotting this up, the smarter you are, the faster the job gets done, the smarter. Hey, if you're all smart, how long do you take?
How long?
You don't. That's right. You don't need time. Time is the least important factor. So that's what I first of all have to dismiss. You're asking me one question, but you're meaning something else. Right? And so that's the commonest sort of attitude out there at the moment, the millions of years.
Oh, I love that. So millions of years, and what's the best answer for why is the earth not millions of years old? Why can we trust God's word, apart from the fact that this is God's word? That's a great reason to trust it. Why, scientifically, do we look at this and say, no, I'm going with this, not only because of what it says, but for Christians out there, we got great evidence to back it up.
Okay, we'll come from two different directions. You see this grey hair? I've been on planet Earth a few more years than you have.
3 at least.
At least 3, that's right. But what it tells me is that all the theories about how old the world was that I learnt doing a geology degree in Queensland University, I'm old enough to know that they've all gone by the board.
Wow.
Right? And they've now got new theories, and the new theories still disagree with the Bible, even though they disagree with the old theories. Right? So there's lesson number 1. Lesson number 2 coming from that side. One year I had to give a presentation to the Oxford Union. You've been to Oxford, haven't you? Right. This is sort of a specialty group.
I've been in the shopping centre.
Oh, you're in the shopping centre.
And I was there actually handing out copies of the Darwin's Origin of Species,
right, doing that.
with a special forward by Ray Comfort.
That's right. Yeah. So anyway, I thought I'm going to go and do my extra research because I'm sure as eggs this question will come up. So I'd been following an Aussie fossil, a fossil that was found in Australia in 1910. But of course, those were the days of the British Empire, you know, and God was British and they owned the world. So
we know he's American now.
Yeah, and Republican.
And Republican.
Right, and basically they took this fossil to the Natural History Museum in England. And I first came across it in 1987. Now, I'm a bit weird, I know, but I not just photograph fossils, I photograph the little labels down in the corner.
Right, you want to know what they say?
Yeah, what they say. And it said, this fossil was found in St. Peter's in Sydney and it's 200 million years old. Okay, 1987. Well, I went back there in 1999, the year I had to give this presentation. I thought, I'll just check up on my fossil. Right? And here is a new label. Click. This is one of the only known specimens of an amphibian found in Australia, 235 million years old. And I thought, it's not 35 million years since I've been at this museum. Right? And so at that point I thought, I'm going to get out the original shipping certificates and see how old it was when it left Australia. And in 1910, guess how old it was?
6,000?
No, it was 180 million years old.
180
now,
to 200.
Do you realise we've got a lot of ladies out there who are watching and they think they're ageing fast?
Yeah.
But this fossil, he aged 55 million years in only 70 years, basically. And you think, hang on, if the 235 million years was a fact, you could not read the Bible as real history. If the 200 million years was a fact, you could not. If the 180, you can follow the argument.
Right.
But the fact is, they're all just the latest PhDs. That's all they are.
Wow.
And so the dates of planet Earth that contradict the Bible, well, I love to put it and tell people there's plenty of opinions, plenty of theories that contradict everything in the Bible, but the facts never do. That's coming from the scientific end. Coming from the biblical end, the question I've learned to ask is, okay, we like to say, how long would you need to make a planet? It's the wrong question. The question should be, given that the Bible says Jesus Christ is the creator, how long would he need to make the planet? And the best example for Christians is go to John chapter 2 and he turned water into?
Wine.
Okay, H2O gives C2H5OH. Right, now the breweries would love to find out how he did this. It would cut their overheads to the bone, right? But in other words, H is hydrogen, O is oxygen, but C is carbon. And he didn't spit into it, he didn't drop anything into it, he just spoke. And that's why it says, in the beginning was the Word. And in other words, you don't need time to turn water into wine, you need talent. And the more talent you've got, the less time you take. So when you go back to Genesis, he didn't need 6 days. He could have made the universe just like that. But he took 6 days for a reason. He tells us in Exodus, I made the world in 6 days and I rested on the 7th, so you'll work for 6 days and you'll rest on the 7th. And he kept his own law, because you remember when this Jesus creator actually rested on the Sabbath, particularly mentioned, did it deliberately so he wouldn't be working?
Yep.
The day after he was crucified.
Wow.
He rested all day on the Sabbath because it was vital that he keep the law whether he was alive or whether he was dead, so we could be saved from our sin.
This is great. Man, I want to continue this conversation and ask more of these questions, because I love getting these solid answers and where we're coming from the Bible, and of course coming from a history of science, which both of you gentlemen have done. So I'm excited about this. I want to get into what the atheist would say to that, though, and what they would respond to that. We'll talk more about you and some of the work that you've done right after this break.
Welcome back. You're watching Creation Today with me, Paul Taylor, and with Eric Hovend and our special guest, John Mackay. And we're glad to have you with us. We're looking at questions on the subject of Bible and science. And we were talking before the break about the big question debate, the debate that John had with the Reverend Dr. Professor Sir John Polkinghorne, KBEFRS, jolly clever man, at Liverpool Cathedral, where our friend here, John Mackay, just blew him out of the water because John Polkinghorne believed that you can mix evolution with Christianity, and John showed on that debate that you can't. And if you want to get that, have a look at John's website, creationresearch.net, or if you want to ask him specific questions, go to askjohnmackay.com, or you can go and have a look at getting hold of this from creationstore.org, where you'll be able to get lots of other interesting products too, like of course the Beginning series by our friend Eric Hovend. That's a good one.
I love that one.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it? Well, you know, we were talking before the break about what atheists say on the subject of dating fossils. You were talking about this particular fossil that had aged so many years in such a short period of time, and it just shows how unfixed their ideas are on dating. They basically make it up as they go along so often, it seems to me. Our good friend Mike Riddle actually said about looking at scientific articles and saying you've got to spot the fuzzy words. And this is something even a non-scientist can do. And quite often you see an article where you'll get the phrase, this has rewritten our whole knowledge about the evolution of whatever. And as soon as you see that, you know that they're basically making it up. They don't know. They've just got something new. It doesn't fit. And so they're basically trying to put some duct tape over the theory of evolution to patch it up. And
well, when you think about it, truth does not change. So the fact that they keep changing their theory means that they haven't had truth. I mean, in order for something to be proven, it has to be true. Is that correct?
And do you know what? One step further they've gone is to deny that truth exists.
That's true.
Right, and so they've defined truth as inoperable, unusable, unmanageable. It doesn't exist. Right?
I love it when they say, we can't know the truth. And I say, do you know that? Or is that true?
There are no absolutes.
Yeah, are you absolutely sure? I love that. So what do atheists say? I mean, you've done a lot of work with fossils. You have in Australia a place where you let people come and dig up fossils and have actually planted some of these what you call living fossils there. Tell our audience, if they didn't catch the last show, which by the way we went into this a little bit, but tell them a little bit about that, and then I want to ask we want to ask you some more questions.
Yes.
Okay, if you go to creationresearch.net and click on the middle column, Jurassic Ark, there's lots of pictures in there, and it's basically a dig site that's sort of growed into a big project. You can now walk from Adam to Australia in our biblical plant gardens. You can follow the murals, you can get your own self-guided tour, you can come and look at the fossil log jam we found there, a flood fossil log jam. In fact, you can join us on a big dig next year if you like. We took a group last year all out to the outback of Australia following this one bed, and it covers gazillion square miles. It's just unbelievably huge. Out near Lake Eyre, you can actually still see the same log bed. It's incredible. So those are the sort of things we've developed. So creationresearch.net, click on Jurassic Ark in the center column and get ready for some wonderful evidence of judgment as well as creation.
Unbelievable. Okay, we were talking about before the program, and by the way, you're taking a trip. You're taking a trip over there in 2012.
Year, 2012,
so, oh, that's going to be exciting. We need to get in on that.
You keep mentioning that.
I know. I think we need to
be very good. Yeah.
Whatever the cost is.
I'm in favour. Yeah.
Well, Kyle.
I don't care how much money we spend. I'll even chip in a couple of cents myself.
You will.
Yeah.
That's British, though, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay. So before the break, we were discussing how fossils have aged very quickly. The reality of how do they actually date these things? Because I know that they came up with the ages of the layers back in the 1800s. Radiocarbon dating is what we most of the time hear. Oh, well, you know, radiocarbon dating proves, but that wasn't invented until what, the 50s?
You get 1947, you get carbon-14, you get the 1950s, the finalisation of the uranium, rubidium.
Paul remembers that he was there.
Well, it did happen in the University of Edinburgh, not down in England where you are.
That's right.
But anyway, what you'll find is you get two types of responses. One is what I call the Richard Dawkins response, because I've debated him. You can see bits of it on YouTube. And when you bring up a solid fact, like, hang on, this fossil is not 300 million years old or 200. 1900. Look how much it's changed, right? And his first level of response is, well, how dare you even demand public funds, you know, and have tax deductibility? And you think, what's that got to do with what we're talking about?
We're talking science here.
We're talking science here, and you end up with a personal attack. That's the commonest sort of response. I mean, you people, how do you say this with peer-reviewed journals, and you're not, you know, and you think, come on, Richard, talk stuff, right? Talk facts. So that's the first level of response. But I'm not surprised they resort to that response, because one of the things that we bring out on the DVD you're in, Darwin on the Rocks, is how they got this aging system in the first place. And it's due to a Scotsman who actually took up being English and graduated in law. His name is Charles Lyell, and he sort of was Charles Darwin's mentor. He's a bigger problem than Darwin is, but Darwin was his disciple, and because of a door that Lyell opened for the vast amount of time, Darwin walked through, developed his theory of evolution. But then Lyell and Darwin tag-teamed, or team-tagged, whatever you say over here, right? And Lyell started to use Darwin's ideas to date the rocks. And a classic example is that, okay, you start in the Ordovician rocks, the ones you and I were filming in, right? And you find fossil snails. They're easy to recognise. They look like fossil snails, right? And so you'd think, hey, the evidence is snails have produced their own kind.
Complex science, this, isn't it?
It really is hard stuff, right? Yes, it's just, I keep saying the only thing about common sense is it ain't all that common.
It's not, that's for sure.
And then what Lyell did was say, well, if you add up all the rock layers up to the top, there seems to be 12 variations in the snail group. So if we have the evolution of species, hey Charles, how long does it take to get one snail evolving to another species? And Darwin's answer was 20 million years. And so 12 times 20 is 240. So the Ordovician rocks, before radioactive dating, before any other thoughts like that, automatically became 240 million years old by fiat declaration. That's it. No evidence, right? And you never get taught this at university because it would make it look so stupid, because it is. It actually is. There's no way to get around it. So I'm not surprised the atheists will launch into a personal attack because there's no database. Once you get into their database, here's what you find. It's a logical construct that they never want you to find out what presuppositions it's built on. Because the chief presupposition is, again, Charles Lyell, my aim is to remove science from Moses.
Wow.
Right? So if they go to creationresearch.net, click on search, insert evidence search, and then Lyell, they'll get all these quotes, and that's what the motivation was. I'm going to get rid of Moses out of the Bible, but you know how he did it? He never told anybody what he was doing. Gotcha. He never attacked the Bible, never attacked the church, right? Sent his money to the church every week, but actually undermined it totally.
And the name of his book, Charles Lyell's book, was Principles of Geology.
Yeah, this is just absolutely incredible stuff, isn't it? You know, that Lyell was trying to undermine Moses. We need to talk about that later. And we've also learned that you can recognize fossil snails because they look like snails. More after this.
Are you busy getting ready for the coming school year? Don't forget to prepare for non-Christian worldviews in the classroom. These 5 books by Dr. Hovind in the award-winning Creation Seminar Series Part 4 lies in the textbooks, now featuring Dr. Hovind's latest resource, Help, I'm Being Taught Evolution 1 and 2. In these books, students will find a great way to dialogue with their teachers about evolution. The book entitled, Are You Being Brainwashed? Is specially designed to help students quickly and effectively defend their faith from the attacks of evolutionism in public school classrooms. The gap theory debunks the unnecessary and misguided compromise that Christians sometimes make in inventing a gap between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2, allowing for millions of years to be inserted. And finally, Claws, Jaws, and Dinosaurs, with its emphasis on cryptozoology, is included in this limited time offer. To order this back-to-school package, go to creationstore.org.
Welcome back to Creation Today. We're having a great time with Paul Taylor and John Mackay in the studio. John is all the way from Australia and has joined us to have some good times and teach about science and the Bible. And I love where we're going with this. Paul, you mentioned during the break we were discussing how we really do need to get into the presuppositions where Lyell came up with these thoughts and why we need to expose what really happened there.
Well, it's really that I want you, John, to be able to expand on the thing that we just sort of ran out of time with before the break, really. And I don't want our viewers to miss this point that Lyell, who developed the ideas of long ages of millions of years, that as John was telling us, they did not come from radiometric dating. This is long before radiometric dating. It was basically sort of ideas going backwards and forwards between Charles Lyell and Charles Darwin, developing this idea of millions of years and giving this sort of divine fiat on their part as to what age something should be. But it's very important that we know that there was a motivation behind what Lyell said. And you mentioned this before the break, but I really want you to emphasize it again for our viewers so they don't miss it. What was his motivation?
Okay, I'll actually go back a few years, if that's all right, to
certainly.
give it a historic context. You ever heard of Theophilus?
I have.
Okay, in the 2nd century, Theophilus said the world was made about 5,700 years ago, plus or minus 200, right? It's interesting that they actually had that concept, right? And of course, he was basing his edition on the Septuagint version, which was common amongst the Christian in those days. And then he went on to say, not the tens of thousands that Plato and the others have stated. Plato,
Tens of thousands.
pagan, right? So
Right.
here we have the pagans versus the Christians, revealed authority versus man's deductions. Now, the basis of the argument has not changed. By the time you get to the French in the 1700s, increasing atheism, increasing rationalism, so you get Comte de la Buffon, right? And Comte de la Buffon,
I can't say that.
well, you got the wrong accent. G'day, y'all.
Yeah, that's right. How y'all doing?
And Comte de Buffon basically said the Earth is a blob and it cooled down from a blob of molten iron. So he took a ball of iron and he heated it up and let it cool down and said if this little ball takes that many weeks to cool down, then this big ball takes at least 70,000 years. Now, his presupposition, that's where he came up with that. Whatever's happening in the present has always happened. Now, even though he never publicly attacked the biblical position at all, the Bible position, as stated in Moses, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, is that once there wasn't a world, then there was. Right. The present is not the key to the past. That world was very good. Now it isn't. The present is not the key to the past. Once it didn't rain, now it does. The present, you can see the difference in approach.
Yeah.
Okay, now, de Buffon was French. So if the French say it, the English reject it. You want to know that, right? But the Scots, if the English reject it, the Scots will grab it, right? Because we've been fighting them for a long time.
That's right.
And anyway, so in Edinburgh University, they start to promote this present is the key to the past concept. It's not got fancy words yet, but Charles Lyell grew up just outside of Edinburgh. He comes to England, writes a book in 1831. What's happening in society? Well, over there in France, where they'd run with the biblical catastrophic model, you know, God made the world good, then it's destroyed by Noah's flood, e.g. the present is not the key to the past. Right. Then they started to say, well, Cuvier, there's at least 4 major catastrophes based on the rocks. Extinct creatures, extinct creatures, extinct creatures.
They're looking at the rock
They're
layers,
looking at the rock layers as their authority, right? And then his disciples said, no, there's 27 different layers under France, under Paris alone. And so by the time you get to the end of that cycle, there's so many catastrophes, it just looks plain stupid, right?
Yeah, silly, yeah.
So Lyell takes advantage and says, get rid of catastrophism, replace it with, well, what became known as uniformitarianism. And basically use only what you can see in the present and extrapolate backwards. Now, that just looks like, okay, we're being scientists, we just look at the present. If it wasn't for the fact that after he died, his sister had collected his letters, and in one of those letters is, my aim is to free science from Moses. Wow. Now, if you're wondering why it's had such an impact on the church in England or the church in America, it was Jesus who said, if you don't believe Moses, John chapter 5, then you won't believe me. Now, you're looking at this truth that Jesus gave us being fulfilled, because you're looking at America where most of the Republicans, most of the Democrats no longer believe Moses, so don't be surprised they don't believe Jesus. The two go hand in hand, and Jesus said that's the way it works. Wow. Right? And so that's sort of the motivation, the long-term consequence. These guys belong to a group that said the monarchy in England is based on the concept of Moses being right. God is the creator. He has the right to appoint kings. you know, the divine rule of kings. You want to get rid of the monarchy, you have to get rid of the creator.
Wow.
Right? And so you can see England's monarchy has just faded away, and they really don't know why. But the reality is the whole foundation of every structure in society that's organised actually comes based on the God who is the organiser.
Yeah.
Get rid of that organisation and no longer in God we trust.
That's right.
So the society, whether it's American democracy or British monarchy, has no basis for truth. It will collapse.
And that's exactly where we see ourselves today. I mean, that hits the nail on the head for why is America in the state that it's in? Why is society in the state that it's in? It's because we've rejected a foundation.
Yep.
And when you reject that, you're left with chaos.
That's
you're
exactly
left
right.
with anything goes.
And it's really hard to share the gospel because the people you're talking to live on another planet. They think their brains got there by accident. So don't be surprised they can't think through the logical arguments, which, whether Christians know it or not, our presupposition is God is a God of order, my thoughts have to be ordered. And ordered thoughts from A to Z prove something. But a non-Christian, thoughts are whatever.
Yeah,
right? They don't have to be logical. They can even be illogical, right? What's the problem, right?
That's true.
And so you will find that if you want to share the gospel, you have to begin in the beginning. God made the world. He made it good. That's why sin is so bad. What's sin? Well, God has the right to tell us what's wrong, and He has the right to tell us what to repent of. He has the right to judge sin. And if He judges sin, you and me and everybody else, from President Obama downwards, are in trouble. But good news, this God came down as a man and He chose to die on the cross in your place and mine. You can get off the hook. That's good news, isn't it?
It's marvellous news, and we know it should be preached. We just had a mini sermon there, and it's good stuff.
We did. Where can they get more? I'm looking at, we carry some of your DVDs, of course, at creationstory.org. They can
and
get
they
up on
can
your
go
website.
to our office in Tennessee, which is on our creationresearch.net website.
And then if they have questions for you, of course, askjohnmackay.com. So, wow.
Well, we could do about 10 of these, couldn't we, Eric?
You're not kidding. I love it. This gets down to right where it matters with worldviews, with what's going to happen when we die. All of that comes right into this. Well, that is our show for today. I want to thank John for joining us. If you have questions, feel free to send them in to questions@creationtoday.org. You can also join us on Twitter @CreationToday and Facebook, facebook.com/Creation Today.
Well, tune in every episode, remember, to see if we've answered your question. And of course, these programs are being archived online at creationtoday.org. This has been a production of God Quest Ministries.
Thank you guys very much for joining us.